A desperate aging celebrity takes a mysterious black market serum that allows her to relive her glory days. However, as selfishness and greed disrupts the perfect balance, the woman suffers the devastating effects of her rash decision. On the Hollywood Walk of Fame, workers install Elisabeth Sparkle's star, celebrating her success in the industry. Over the years, the monument develops cracks as it weathers the changing seasons and the thousands of people walking across it daily. In the present, Elisabeth films the latest episode of her morning aerobics TV show, Sparkle Your Life. After the shoot, the exhausted celebrity walks down a long hallway where several employees greet her a happy 50th birthday. Because the women's restroom's out of order, she decides to use the men's, seeing as there's nobody inside. After she enters a stall, the show's producer, Harvey, uses the urinal while talking to someone on the phone. Elisabeth overhears the man callously stating that they need to replace her with someone prettier and more youthful as soon as possible. Seconds after Harvey leaves, the devastated woman exits the stall and tries to process what she just heard. Later, the producer invites Elisabeth to lunch to deliver the unfortunate news. He explains that viewers constantly crave something new, subtly alluding that she's too old to continue hosting the show. To cut the awkward conversation short, the man leaves the table to talk to a friend, and the stunned woman stares at a helpless fly stuck in her drink. That afternoon, Elisabeth drives along the highway and gets momentarily distracted when she sees workers taking down her billboard. Suddenly, another vehicle slams into her car at an intersection, resulting in a major accident. At the hospital, the doctor informs the woman that she's lucky she didn't suffer any injuries. However, when the physician greets her a happy birthday after reading her chart, the celebrity starts sobbing. Seconds later, the doctor receives an urgent message on his pager and leaves the examination room. As Elisabeth moves to grab her clothes so she can change out of her hospital gown, the male nurse stops her and says he needs to perform one last examination. Then, the man pinches the skin on her back, runs his finger along her spine, and says she'd be a good candidate, confusing the woman. Before he leaves, the nurse hands the celebrity her yellow coat and she sees the prominent birthmark on his wrist. Outside the hospital, Elisabeth checks her pockets and finds a flash drive labeled TheSubstance, along with a note from the nurse stating that it changed his life. Suddenly, the enthusiastic Fred approaches the woman and reminds her that they went to high school together. Hoping they can grab a drink sometime, the man writes his phone number on a piece of paper and hands it to the celebrity. In her apartment, the curious Elisabeth inserts the flash drive into her TV and it automatically plays a video. The voice asks the woman if she's ever dreamt of a better version of herself. It continues that a single injection of the substance will unlock her DNA and start a new cellular division, creating another version of herself. The video explains that she is the Matrix, which means everything involved in the continuation of the process will come from her. It emphasizes that both versions must respect the balance of 7 days each and that she must always remember that they are one and the same. Once the video finishes, Elisabeth tosses the flash drive into the trash. That evening, she spends the night drinking at a bar by herself and realizes that men her age no longer find her appealing. Back in her apartment, the woman throws up in the commode and stares at her tear-stained face in the mirror. Moments later, she picks up a snow globe and angrily throws it at the giant portrait of herself, covering it with glitter. Later, she fishes the flash drive out of the trash and calls the phone number. During the call, the woman says that she'd like to place an order, and all the voice gives her is an address. The next day, the hungover celebrity reads the paper and sees a casting call looking for youthful, vivacious women who want to become the next Elisabeth Sparkle. While checking her mail, she sees a mysterious package with a key card labeled 503 inside. Soon, the woman heads to the address and uses the card to open the rolling door. At the end of the hallway, the celebrity enters a white room and she takes the box inside her designated locker. In the apartment, Elisabeth opens the package and finds a bag labeled Activator with a strict warning that states it's a single-use serum and should be disposed of immediately. Next, she picks up the stabilizer meant for the other self and the switch, which are 2 intravenous lines attached to cannulas on both ends. Lastly, the woman takes out 2 bags of food matrix good for 7 days each. At the bottom of the box, the celebrity finds instruction cards stating that she only needs to activate once, stabilize every day, switch every 7 days without exception, and always remember that they are one. In the bathroom, the clothless Elisabeth fills the syringe with the activator, leaving a decent amount still in the bottle. Then, the woman wraps a tourniquet around her arm and injects the serum into her vein. Seconds later, she feels a sharp pain and falls to the floor. As she writhes in agony, her pupil splits into 2 and a large mass begins to move under her skin. Suddenly, a separate blue eye develops right next to her green one and a person's knee pops out of the large incision on her back. Moments later, the other self finally sees her reflection in the mirror and admires how youthful she looks. As she takes a closer look, she sees the activator glowing in her iris. After noticing Elisabeth's body on the floor, the woman throws up a yellow liquid. Then, she uses the sutures included in the package to sew up the incision on the celebrity's back. To make sure the original self survives, she inserts the food matrix cannula into her wrist for nutrition. The next day, the other self hears a ringing in her ears and blood drips from her nose. so the woman uses a large needle to extract stabilizer fluid from Elisabeth via a lumbar puncture. Then, she takes a day's worth of the clear liquid and injects it into her thigh. Later, the other self does her morning stretches in the living room and spots the newspaper with a casting call ad. As she walks down the street, she sees a shiny pink bodysuit in a storefront window. During the audition, the woman wears the eye-catching garment, and when the casting director asks for her name, she introduces herself as Sue. Soon, the woman meets with Harvey, who says she's exactly who they were looking for, and that they aim to air the first episode in 2 weeks. However, she brings up a scheduling issue, explaining that she has to take every other week off to take care of her ailing mother. Surprisingly, the producer doesn't have a problem with her request and agrees to work around her schedule. Days later, Sue completes a photo shoot and a billboard advertising her new show pops up in front of the apartment. For the rest of the week, the woman practices the routine with her dancers and buys new clothes. Once the 7 days are up, she attaches the switch cannulas to her and Elisabeth's arms, and the blood flowing through the tubes implies a transfer of consciousness. Seconds later, the celebrity wakes up with the unconscious other self on top of her. After taking a shower, Elisabeth returns to the studio where Harvey nonchalantly hands her a box of her belongings, along with a gift he and the other employees got her. In the apartment, the woman marks a calendar with Sue's name so they won't forget when they need to switch. The next day, she receives a note stating that her refill kit has been delivered to her locker, so the celebrity retrieves the package and stores the items in the medicine cabinet. After the next switch, Sue sees the indentation on the chair in front of the TV and deduces that Elisabeth spent her week cooped up in the apartment. Realizing she needs to hide the woman's body instead of just leaving her on the bathroom floor, she knocks down a wall to turn it into a secret room. Because of the loud noise, her neighbor Oliver bangs on the door to complain. However, when the man sees the beautiful lady, he quickly forgets his anger and proceeds to flirt with her. He asks where Elisabeth is, so Sue lies and says that she moved out and that she's the new tenant. Later, the woman drags the celebrity to the bathroom and places her inside the dark secret room behind the tile wall. Then, she removes the large portrait from the living room and hides it away. Soon, Sue films the first episode of her new show, Pump It Up. After the routine, the delighted producer commends her on a job well done. That night, she puts on a skin-tight leather bodysuit and sees that there are only a few hours worth of food matrix left before she needs to switch. Still, the woman chooses to spend the night partying with her friends. Eventually, she returns to the apartment with Troy, and as they're about to do the deed, Sue hears the ringing in her ears and has a nosebleed. So she stumbles to the secret room where she sees Elisabeth struggling due to the empty food matrix bag. However, instead of switching, the woman takes a used canister and extracts a day's worth of stabilizer from the celebrity to buy herself a few hours. Moments later, Sue and Troy continue their intimate moment, but when the man unzips the bodysuit, her organs fall out of her back. Suddenly, Elisabeth wakes up, and upon seeing that the other self's back is fine, she realizes it was just a nightmare. To her horror, she finds that her index finger has aged more rapidly than the rest of her body. After feeling the tenderness of the extraction site on her back and the empty injector next to Sue, she deduces that the other self didn't switch on time. Later, the celebrity calls the hotline regarding the procedure to reverse the effects of substance misuse, but the voice says what's been used on one side is lost on the other. When the woman talks about Sue as if she's another person, the voice reminds her that they are one, and all inconveniences can be avoided as long as they respect the balance. After the call, Elisabeth throws the motorcycle helmet Troy forgot into the hallway and proceeds to clean the apartment. That afternoon, she picks up the refill kit and stops at a diner. Suddenly, the old man sitting at another table mentions how long 7 days is. At first, the woman doesn't know what he's talking about, but then she sees the birthmark on his wrist and realizes that he's the male nurse from the hospital. He continues that it gets more lonely each time he switches, and it gets harder to remember that he still deserves to exist. As the spooked celebrity stands up to leave, the man asks if her other self has already started eating away at her. Outside the apartment building, Elisabeth bumps into Troy, whose disrespect towards her is a stark contrast to how he treats Sue. In the apartment, the woman searches for Fred's number and invites him out for a drink. That evening, she wears a red dress and black gloves to hide the aged finger. After putting on her makeup, the celebrity closes the door to the secret room and she catches a glimpse of Sue's beautiful youthful face. In the living room, she looks up and sees the giant billboard outside the window, so she heads to the bathroom to change up her makeup. Finally satisfied with her look, Elisabeth heads to the front door. However, she catches her reflection on the doorknob and she can't help comparing herself to Sue. In a fit of anger and self-loathing, the woman rubs off her lipstick and aggressively ruins her makeup and hairdo in front of the mirror. Later that night, she receives several messages from Fred asking why she isn't at the restaurant. During filming, she feels a lump protruding from her backside when she bends down, so she heads to the dressing room and moves the mask toward her stomach. Then, she inserts her fingers into her belly button and pulls out an entire chicken leg. Suddenly, the woman wakes up in the secret room and realizes it was just a nightmare. In the living room, she sees a plate of bones and deduces that Elisabeth ate an entire roast chicken in one sitting. missing. That afternoon, Sue tells the hotline that the balance isn't working because she barely has enough time to enjoy herself while the celebrity wastes the week stuffing her face in front of the TV. Later, Harvey informs the star that he wants her to host the prestigious New Year's Eve show, much to her delight. Believing she can't let the opportunity pass her by, Sue disregards the switching schedule and extends her time by extracting stabilizer every day. One day, she tells Elisabeth that she's doing the cover of Vogue magazine, and even though she sees how infected the extraction site is, she still inserts the large needle. Several weeks after the last switch, the celebrity finally wakes up, and to her horror, sees that an entire half of her body has aged decades. The woman calls the hotline and says that Sue doesn't respect the balance and is stealing more and more time from her without consideration of the consequences. So the voice asks if she'd like to stop the experience and return to being on her own. But she looks at the billboard and says she'll try to make everything work out. That night, Elisabeth straightens out her arthritic knee just so she can walk toward the bookshelf. The woman opens the gift and sees that it's a French cookbook. While Sue's interview plays on the TV, the furious celebrity mocks her answers as she cooks in the kitchen. When the host asks for her beauty secret, Elisabeth opens her robe and states that she's responsible for the star's youthful appearance. Then, the woman throws raw eggs on the glass window and covers it up with newspapers so she doesn't have to look at the billboard. After the switch, the furious Sue sees the disgusting state of the apartment. Determined to remain in the new body for as long as she can, the woman gathers several empty glass jars and fills all of them up with a stabilizer. Disregarding the bruised and infected state of the extraction site, she repeatedly inserts the large needle to drain as much fluid as she can. 3 months later, on December 30th, Sue admires the billboard advertising tomorrow's New Year's Eve show. Then, her boyfriend Diego asks if she's coming to bed and she says she'll be right there. The woman heads to the secret room to extract a day's worth of stabilizer. But to her surprise, the fluid is a dark brown color, implying that the body's run out. Panicked, Sue calls the hotline, but the only advice the voice offers is to switch so the original body can replenish the supply. Left with no choice, she crawls to the bathroom to initiate the switch. Diego hears the noise from the bedroom and asks if she's alright. To her horror, the woman sees that she's transformed into a hairless, deformed hunchback. In her anger, she orders the boyfriend to get out, so the frightened man leaves the apartment. Moments later, Elisabeth calls the hotline and says she wants to stop the experience. Then, she drags the large portrait back into the living room. The next day, the celebrity receives a note informing her that the final kit has been delivered, so she retrieves the package and heads directly back to the apartment. The woman drags Sue's body to the living room and injects the termination serum into her chest. However, because both versions share the same consciousness, Elisabeth still craves the attention she gets as her other self, so she stops just before administering the full dose. Realizing she still needs Sue, the woman attaches the switching tubes on their wrists. However, when the blood doesn't flow, she stabs the cannula into the unconscious lady's chest, and the unconventional tactic results in both versions being fully conscious at the same time. Seeing the termination syringe on the floor, Sue realizes what happened, so she flies into a rage and attacks the celebrity. In the bathroom, she slams Elisabeth into the mirror several times, disfiguring her face. Seconds later, the injured woman crawls back to the living room, where the vindictive other self kicks her body until she perishes. Suddenly, Sue remembers that they are one and is horrified by what she'd done. A few hours before the show, the woman gets dressed in her blue ball gown. However, she hears the ringing in her ears and has a coughing fit, so she excuses herself to the bathroom. To her shock, a tooth falls out of her mouth, and she easily pulls out 2 more. When a production assistant knocks on the door, Sue rinses the blood from her mouth and remembers the leftover activation serum back in the apartment. Moments later, Harvey and the shareholders stop her in the hallway, so she puts on a brave face while making sure they don't see her missing teeth. After the tense conversation, the woman gets on an elevator where she sees a fingernail and ear fall off. Then, Sue runs to the apartment and injects the activation serum into her arm, hoping she produces a better version of herself. As the substance takes effect, the rapidly replicating cells create Monstro Elisa Sue, a grotesque hybrid of both women. As the creature stares at herself in the mirror, Elisabeth's face protrudes from her back, her mouth agape as if in a constant scream. Determined to make it to the show on time, Elisa Sue puts on the blue ball gown, inserts the earrings into her flesh, and fashions a mask using the celebrity's portrait. Later, she walks back to the studio where she imagines the network employees welcoming her with words of adoration. Eventually, the New Year's Eve show begins, and the creature lumbers into the spotlight. She starts her speech, but the freakish voice confuses the crowd. Suddenly, the mask falls off and a globular mass pops out of a mouth on the side of her face. Seconds later, a woman stands up and screams at the terrifying sight, and multiple people call Elisa Sue a monster. The auditorium devolves into chaos, and even though the creature insists that she's still Elisabeth, one man decapitates her with a microphone stand. However, Elisa Sue grows another head, and when her arm breaks off, the severed artery violently sprays blood into the crowd, drenching everyone in the bodily fluid. Soon, the creature escapes into the streets, but her deteriorating body collapses and smashes into viscera in the concrete. Moments later, Elisabeth's face crawls out of the bloody pile and onto her neglected star on the Walk of Fame. As she stares at the stars glistening in the night sky, she remembers how much people adored her. After a brief moment of happiness and peace, the fleshy mass dissolves into a pool of blood. The next day, a floor scrubber cleans up the late celebrity's remains, leaving behind her only lasting legacy, the star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame.
Subscribe to watch more videos like this, turn on notifications and leave a like to help the channel out. Thank you for watching.